Hi, everybody. Hi. Hello. Thank you all for coming today. I'm really happy to present. I'm going to try to be loud, but I'm naturally kind of a quiet person. So we'll see how loud I can be. Is this a good volume? I know there's some folks in the back. I'll try to remain at this volume. All right. So my name is Nilson Carroll, and I am the Assistant Curator and Preservation Specialist at Visual Studies Workshop in Rochester, New York. I'm also an artist working at the intersections of experimental video games, glitch, and queer embodiment. As a curator at VSW, I specialize in featuring experimental artists' games and media art, and as an educator, teaching accessible DIY approaches to game making for artists and storytellers. I also manage VSW's in-house media transfer lab, which focuses on the preservation of historical videotapes. You can see my lab on the right there. As an artist, I make autobiographical poem and diary-based video games. My preferences tend towards non-saleable art, glitches, difficult puzzles, spatial poetry, flashing lights, and magic spells. I like to be challenged, and I'm interested in ways in which my own assumptions can be subverted. I was also one of the co-founders of the Queer Games Bundle, which started in 2021. It was a large-scale international mutual aid project that directly benefited hundreds of queer makers. Today, I'll be talking a bit about Visual Studies Workshop, where I work. But the main topic of my presentation is going to be SEQUENCEBREAK Experimental Arcade, which was an exhibition that I curated last year. And then I'll also be talking about what I learned from that experience. So Visual Studies Workshop's mission is to nurture experimental and expansive approaches to photography and the media arts and build community among artists and the public through exhibitions, publications, and residencies. Visual Studies Workshop was founded in 1969 in Rochester, New York, by Nathan Lyons as an alternative photography education program. And since its inception, VSW has been an arts organization run by artists to support other artists. And its history as an art center is important to the fields of photography, independent publishing, artist books, experimental film and video, and new and interactive media. Historically, VSW has been a site for supporting subversive, interdisciplinary, and non-commercial art and art practices. Many of these art forms have roots in the Fluxus movement, with artists focusing less on the aesthetics and content of their work and more on the distribution and politics of their art making. And you can see two of the collection areas in VSW. We just wrapped up a 4-month-long exhibition, Per Bada Signal to Memory, which was a video art exhibition featuring the recently preserved tapes of video artist Per Bada, many of which were made at the Experimental Television Center in Owego, New York, in the 1970s and 80s. I'm sad to see it go. I loved this exhibition. It was fun to have in the gallery. At VSW, there are several ways in which we support experimental games and the artists making them. We regularly host pop-up arcades, which are 1 to 2 night events where an artist or collective's work is installed in VSW and open to the public. And I have a slide here. We invited Barnyardia, Blake Andrews and Frank DeMarco. This was in 2024. And Blake here is live coding a game sort of in the middle of the event. It was quite fun. VSW also runs a project-based residency program, which hosts 12 artists a year, including Jackie, who's in the audience. The artists are given housing, studio space, and access to our print lab, darkroom, and collections for a month. This residency is open to photographers, book artists, filmmakers, and new and interactive media artists. Perhaps one of you. VSW also features 2 to 3 exhibitions a year in its gallery. I'll be speaking today about one of them called SEQUENCEBREAK. SEQUENCEBREAK was a group show that I curated featuring 5 experimental narrative games made by artists. that ran from March 20th to June 28th, 2025. It was a fully interactive exhibition with games that challenge mainstream commercial video game values and expectations through genre-expanding experimental play, radical aesthetics, and the use of DIY counter-capitalist methodologies. It was important to me to be able to exhibit these games in a physical, real space, one that people could return to over the long run of the exhibition, while also serving a broader audience online through streaming events like artist talks and Let's Plays. The artists featured in Sequence Break were Stephen Gillmurphy, also known as the Catamites, Nathalie Lawhead, Philip Mallory Jones, Cassie McQuater, and Hart Street, who is Yuxin Gao, Lillyan Ling, Gus Boehling, and John Bruneau. Now let's talk a bit about each of the games in the exhibition. Made over the course of 4 years by Stephen Gillmurphy and originally uploaded to the online games community Game Jolt, Anthology of the Killer is a collection of serialized nightmare scenarios, delicately handmade with a frantic DIY punk energy. Each episode included in the anthology takes full advantage of the dream logic of video games, blurring the lines between game playing, wandering through a party, and witnessing an alien ritual. Reminiscent of the great children's cartoons of the 1990s, the game features equal parts humor and horror, depicting a worldview that is both critical of society's values as shallow, dangerous, and hypocritical, and revels in the strangeness and obsessiveness of ordinary people. Filled with wiggling paintings, dark hallways, disgruntled policemen, and secret chambers, Anthology of the Killer is a maximalist video game filled with thousands of jokes about art, games, and contemporary culture. In other words, as Gillmurphy writes about the game, nobody gets out of here alive. Blue Suburbia by Nathalie Lawhead is a poetic, haunted 3D landscape where players are asked to confront difficult questions, feelings, and memories while navigating a dense, surreal maze. Appearing at first as a vision of horror, Blue Suburbia reveals itself to be in search of hope, asking its players to stay vigilant and to hang on to faith. Originating as a net art, flash-based cult classic from 1999, this contemporary reimagining of the artist's work furthers the themes of feeling isolated and vulnerable in today's heightened cultural climate. Lawhead writes that Blue Suburbia is a commentary on strength and not giving up, despite the world trying to destroy you. You are the light in that darkness. Created by artist Philip Mallory Jones and his media company Alchemy Media Publishing, Time Machine Bronzeville is a narrative game that explores the explores the stories, cityscape, legends, and lore of Chicago's South Side circa 1940. End quote. Blending a rich array of interactive 3D scenes, audio recordings, historical photographs, newspaper clippings, and other ephemera, the game provides a vivid recreation of the Bronzeville neighborhood, known as the Black Metropolis in the early 20th century due to its high concentration of Black-owned businesses and thriving artist community. Centered around a detailed scale model of the neighborhood, Time Machine Bronzeville encourages a slow-paced, research-based exploration that reveals a wide range of narratives, chronicling real stories of both the everyday and the extraordinary. Through the malleable medium of the digital interactive, the work brings disparate records and documents together to create a space where people's lives actually matter. Lives and histories actually matter. Black Room by Cassie McQuater is a browser-based feminist dungeon crawler that features a cast of vintage, pre-existing video game sprites ripped from their original contexts in order to bring them together to form new, resilient narratives. Primarily women characters from a wide range of games mingled together in impossible landscapes, linked together by dream logic as they perform their looping animations. A game meant to be played late at night, Black Room is a hazy broadcast, a mysterious website, a portal that makes space to begin to imagine radical futures outside the bounds of ownership, industry, and patriarchy. The web browser, resizable, becomes a type of controller, housing secrets beyond its borders. Operating the game can feel uncanny, like navigating someone else's computer. Out for Delivery by Heart Street is a 42-minute interactive documentary shot with a 360-degree video camera. The slice of life experience follows a food delivery courier in Beijing on January 23rd, 2020, the day before Lunar New Year's Eve, and also the day Wuhan shut down due to COVID-19. It's really interesting. It was not meant to be about COVID. That was a surprise. um, Wholly unique in its cinematic presentation, the game features an intense honesty, and through its own self-awareness, avoids operating as an empathy machine, a common criticism of virtual reality projects that flatten or capitalize on real human experience. In retrospect, the footage, a valuable historical document of everyday life in Beijing on the verge of global pandemic, feels very tense, but also reminds players of the warmth and power of human connection. And I'll just say, I love this game. I think it's so good. You can play it for free online. I highly recommend you look it up. I'm just gonna read a few paragraphs from the Sequence Break catalog. I also have some of these, so if this is something of interest to you, come down here at the end of when I'm done talking, and I would be happy to give you one. And then you can also scan that code to get see the digital PDF of it. I'm just going to read for my forward. By design, there are no easy binary distinctions to group the artist games featured in Sequence Break. Some of them can be played for free on the internet, while others can be experienced by paying a fee on Steam. Some of the games were made in Unity or Unreal Engine, while others were handmade from scratch. Some build directly on the robust legacy of online DIY subcultures, while others were made in isolation or in conversation with other types of IRL communities. I prefer the phrase artists games after artists books here rather than art games for two reasons. One, all video games are artworks, which tends to confuse the issue. And two, more importantly, my focus is more on the intentionality and methodology of each artist rather than the games themselves as digital art objects. So it's sort of centering the artist and their art practice. Some artists' games seek to remove competition from play, instead focusing on the experiential, whether narrative or non-narrative. Some artists' games use the language of their mainstream counterparts, whereas others strive to move away from commercial values and design philosophies. Some are more in dialogue with games, and some are more in dialogue with art. Many artist games could be described as fun, and many others seek to move players to see or feel from a different perspective. Many artist games make use of the medium's unique characteristic of interactivity, finding a balance of form and content, playable poetry, or structural games. Artist games consider their player as more than just a customer. Sequence Break is not meant to be a historical survey of artist games, nor is it curated around a specific theme. Each artist follows a different methodology of expression, working outside the boundaries of established genres. The term sequence break refers to the act of going outside of the intended linear sequence featured in a video game, breaking the game's design boundaries toward a new form of play or pathfinding. To sequence break means to go out of order, to push oneself into the margins, to gain a new perspective, to reject rigidness, and to engage in possibility. In conjunction with the exhibition, VSW hosted a number of related programs, including artist talks, live playthroughs, workshops, and gallery tours. I'm always interested in finding alternative ways to engage with games artists, for instance, using the format of a Twitch stream or a Let's Play to function as a kind of artist talk. For instance, we ran a live stream with Nathalie Lawhead where they played their recently released game Individualism in the Dead Internet Age for both a live IRL audience at VSW and an online audience streaming on Twitch while we discussed their art practice, what the game, what they were trying to say with the game, how they made the game. And then it's really fun. The stream ended with a demo of their zine making tool, the Electric Zine Maker. Similarly, for the event Let's Play Collectively, I invited local game developers and other local curators to join me for a both in-person and online live stream of several of the games in the exhibition. And as part of this larger project of bringing experimental games to VSW, I began hosting tool-centric afternoon game jams. And this series promotes game making as an inclusive artistic practice open to diverse makers and anyone who is curious about games, interactive new media, or digital storytelling. And our inaugural game jam, dubbed Coding in the Park, focused on Twine and Bitsy and encouraged participants to work in the public park across the street. It was very lovely. I think that these events go a long way toward our local Rochester community developing an understood and complex vocabulary on artists and experimental games. It also just makes them more accessible. I think seeing how things are made feels really important. Sequence Break was the first exhibition installed in our new gallery. We had just moved. We're actually moving and installing this exhibition at the same time, which is totally crazy. And Sequence Break was designed for flexibility in terms of order of playing. So what someone might play first or second, how they're going to sort of move around the space. The spacing between the games, just making sure that all the games have enough space. And allowing for spectators to watch someone else play. The gallery, which is the first room that visitors encounter when entering our building, has large floor-to-ceiling windows. They're actually quite nice, but they let in a lot of sunlight. So one of the tasks while installing the show was to find a good balance of ambient light, light from the screens and projections, and then also some darkness to allow for the images to not be hampered by reflections or seem dull. Accessibility was another important concern, and we made sure to have benches in the gallery for visitors to sit. Sitting and being comfortable was especially important, as many of the games in the exhibition featured 30 to 60, sometimes longer playtimes or narratives. So, talk about some reflections. The season-long exhibition gave us an opportunity to show games far longer than our two-night pop-up arcades do, and allowed visitors to return multiple times over the course of the exhibition to play more of the games. I was actually initially concerned about some of the longer works being ignored or not thoroughly interacted with, but I found that visitors would often stay for hours, come back to finish a game, and often bring their friends with them when they came back. By having the arcade in the gallery available during other kinds of events at VSW, visitors could walk through and play a video game for a few minutes while they waited for a film screening or an artist talk to start. And parallel to the historical function of the gaming arcade, Sequence Break became a site for meeting up, hanging out, and watching other people play video games. Visitors would constantly surprise me with how they engaged with the work. For instance, children absolutely loved Time Machine Bronzeville, which to me was perhaps the most dense with textual information of any of the games. But kids they had so much fun moving around the camera, and they loved the miniature town and exploring it, and they would just play it all afternoon if they could. Sequence Break's intended audience was wide. I was interested in both engaging with our more traditional arts audiences, as well as inviting more local and regional games audiences and makers to see the show. When exhibiting any game works, it's obviously very important to put care into how the games are interacted with. With Sequence Break's wide intended audience, I really wanted to think about how to accommodate both experienced game players and then also folks, well, there are many of them, who don't play video games or have never played a video game. And one of my main roles as a curator became simply to sort of be in the gallery and show people how to be comfortable playing video games in general. And I think there are many layers to this. I think that even in 2025, people still associate game playing with winning and losing and dying. People are really scared of. I talked about dying a lot with people. People are like, "Oh, I'm gonna die," and so one of the things that I kept finding myself saying, sort of reassuring, the patrons that like you can't die in any of these games. I understand that participation is inherently risky, but I really wanted to have a space where people could be comfortable playing video games. And actually, it's really funny. I was talking to somebody and I was like, "Yeah, you can't die in any of the games." And like, I think I died in Anthology of the Killer, and I like went over and they had like clipped through the level and we're just like infinitely falling, and I was like, "I guess you died." But in general, that's not normal playing. Um, a game like Anthology of the Killer installed with an Xbox-styled gamepad easily lets a visitor pick up and play, whereas a game like Black Room, where the play is more conceptual, might require a visitor to first watch someone else play around with it first. And that being said, an Xbox controller will not be familiar to every visitor. The instructions were really important. The wall text was very important. But even more important than sort of the textual information was just somebody seeing somebody else playing the game and seeing what that was like, and sort of understanding the rhythm of the game, understanding what the game sort of was asking of the player. And honestly, spectating became a big part of Sequence Break. And it's possible that there's a not large percentage of visitors to Sequence Break never played a single game, instead engaging by watching other people play, which I think is totally like valid and interesting. Many visitors would bring their children and let the kids play while they watched behind them. Often, a teenager would become engrossed in Blue Suburbia or Anthology of the Killer, and the parent would wander over to Out for Delivery, and over time, sort of be comfortable playing it, and then end up staying for the whole 42-minute run of it. Having a variety of narrative experiences was not only curatorially important to me, but also logistically important. Unlike photographs or sculpture in a gallery, or even passive media art, the active participatory nature of games in the gallery is always going to be a challenge. Having lots of choices and different ways to spend time in the gallery, especially for audiences not used to playing games, allowed visitors to find their own way forward and to have unique, sort of self-driven experiences. Thinking ahead to a potential future exhibition, I would like to further consider how to use the exhibition design to be both more open to exploration, but also give more guidance to folks. Different layouts of things like movable walls and exhibition furniture, benches, changes how bodies move throughout and spend time in the gallery space. Having larger, more well-lit instructions or wall text could also go a long way for folks to understand how to interact with the work. And while the arcade-like cacophony of the various sounds and songs from the games was, frankly, I loved it. I loved how it sounded. It was rather enjoyable. A more thoughtful use of sound in the space could also provide audiences with a better, in quotes, experience. There were a handful of logistical things that revealed themselves over time, some of which I was able to address during the exhibition. For instance, exhibiting Time Machine Bronzeville on a slightly larger monitor to increase the visibility of the pretty small text, or blocking out the windows better to avoid light spill into the gallery. As the season changed and the angle of the sun changed, the light would hit the window differently, so you kind of have to stay on top of it. Blue Suburbia, which uses standard first-person controls, was installed with a gamer keyboard that had light-up WASD keys, which I think was very helpful. Over time, I found that the way that Out for Delivery was installed through a large format projection could potentially make someone dizzy or slightly nauseous over time due to its VR-like camera style. That's always something to think about. In general, I would like to increase and be more thoughtful about our outreach. I would like to invite more local professors in their classes for gallery tours, invite games groups, and also just engage more with the local indie game dev scene in Rochester, regional, and beyond. These exhibitions are an important site for community building in and around Rochester with a unique mix of audiences. VSW is currently planning to host another experimental games exhibition in spring of 2027. Just it's coming up somehow. This time focusing on artists who appropriate and recontextualize pre-existing mainstream games in their work. I see Sequence Break as sort of a general introduction to experimental and narrative games for our local arts community. And I see this upcoming exhibition as more of a focused and critical engagement with the field. Very excited for it. I'm also very excited to continue to work with both local communities and then also, artists from all around the world. In conjunction with this exhibition, we're already planning to do a pop-up arcade with a group called Ladies and Thadies, which is a collective of women and queer identifying Rochester-based game devs and artists. They're super cool. Within the local and regional community, I do think that developing a new shared vocabulary around games and art allows us to better connect and collaborate, as well as communicate with folks outside of our immediate communities. What I mean by that is just like 5 years ago when I started doing this type of programming, I would say art games or artist games, experimental games, and nobody knew what I was talking about. And I think over the time, doing these types of events, people in Rochester are starting to get it, which is really cool. Game jams have been a way to invite artists from many different backgrounds to understand how games are made and how they can participate too, make their own games. I'm interested in continuing to foster non-commercial ideas around games that focus on games as a mode of expression for their makers. It's an art practice. As I brainstorm new ways to invite others into this magic, I think about a local book club for games or a series of events on how to read games, which I think would be really interesting. Empowering ourselves to better understand how digital media can be made and shared outside of the boundaries of the current established ways, to me, is one of today's most urgent forms of resistance. And I'll just say, witnessing human agency in any media right now, I think, is a form of victory. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
We have time for Q&A.
Yeah, I would love to have a conversation with people. Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. It's really see you build up this discourse of around Rochester. See any people starting to make like art games, experimental games inspired, or art game / experimental games in Rochester after the showcase?
Yeah, so the question is about have these events inspired other local artists to start making experimental games? And I would say two things. One, the game jams have been really amazing. They've been super fun, and the people that show up often have never made a video, never even thought about making a video game, like don't even like computers, And we find, these really easy, accessible tools like Bitsy or Twine. There's a new one that just came out called Plano, Plano, that I love. It's a flat game maker. You know, and so artists, people that like to draw, printmakers, they're just making games now. And that has been really cool to see. And we've actually been doing, I didn't mention in the presentation, but we'll do like a season of game jams, so like 3 or 4 game jams, and then at the end of the season we'll do a pop-up arcade of those games, so then they get to show their work in that space, which has been really cool. And then the other thing I was going to say is that I've met a lot of folks in Rochester who I didn't know, before all of this, and they come to me and they'll be like, I thought I was the only one. I have these like weird ideas, and like people like think my games are weird and ugly, and like the games that you're showing are like, that's what I want to be doing. And so I think people are starting to find out about this space and like feel like it's a space that they can operate in and show their work in. And so yeah, I think It's like sort of an upward trajectory. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, right behind you.
So as a curator, you never receive it better, in a way that's like against the
So your question is about my role as a curator, how that fits into an artist's intention of a work, and then how a player is receiving that work, and like there's obviously going to be tension around that. Um, one of the things that I really try not to do is like dictate how somebody plays. And for instance, like the person who died in Anthology of the Killer, like that was a bug, like that wasn't supposed to happen. And, it wasn't wrong, it wasn't like a wrong way of playing. I mean, honestly, like that's cool. It's cool that they found that. But I do, Black Room, for instance, I think for folks that are sort of used to experimental play, they kind of get it. But I think for a lot of folks, it was kind of hard to get into that work. And so I found myself just sort of like if people were in the gallery, we were having a conversation about the work, I would just start playing it. And so I'm not telling them how to play it. I'm just showing by an example of like, oh, look, you can like do this, and like, oh, you can do this. Like you've probably never even seen, this part of the game, but like just kind of like exploring with them rather than dictating how they should play. But it's tricky, because you want people to experience the work. That's why it's there. But you also, yeah, don't want to tell them exactly what to do. So that's always a question. And I do think that like as audiences engage with the work more, they become more comfortable with just like these types of, all these sort of different methods of playing. I think even just within the scope of this exhibition, somebody might walk in and look up at Black Room and be like, I don't know what that is. Like, I can't interact with that. And then they'll go through and then they'll see Out for Delivery, which I think might be maybe the most accessible of the games. And they'll just like watch it for a second and there's just like a mouse on the pedestal and they'll kind of move it. And then like the camera starts moving. They're like, okay, like I can play a game. And then they go back and then they see Black Room and they're like, okay, like, oh, it has a mouse. Like I've been using a mouse in here, and like just by being in the space and engaging with something, they suddenly become more comfortable to engage with everything. So yeah. 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 Right behind you, back there.
So I have a two-part question.
Okay.
And they're both around links.
Mm-hmm.
So the first part is points. I'm kind of curious, you were talking about kind of attack both people from like the art space and the game space.
Yes.
In terms of who actually showed up,
Mm-hmm.
what was that next line? And were there any surprises there?
Yeah, so the question is about I mentioned sort of a traditional arts audience and then more of a games audience, and what was sort of the demographic of folks that actually showed up and played the games. And so, VSW has a long history of, doing film screenings, photo exhibitions, so there's interdisciplinary stuff. We publish artist books. And so there is this sort of historical community, I guess I would say, of folks that are open to experimental media, and experimental media might look different now than it did in 1970, but like, the methods of making are sort of the same or they're related. And so I think that the art audience, they maybe they didn't play all the games or play any of the games, but I think they appreciated what was going on. And so I think a lot of art audiences did show up. I think there's so much energy around video games in Rochester specifically. We have the Rochester Institute for Technology, which has this huge games program. And so there are a lot of, especially younger people, interested in games, making games. And I think, I'm always trying to like offer VSW to specifically students, that are in like game design courses, as sort of it's almost an alternative, right? It's like, you're in school, you're learning about how to be in the industry, you're learning how to sort of be a professional in the field, and then like also there's this weird thing in the corner that you can also engage with and be an artist and be expressive. And so I think that there were students who really got that and were into it and showed up to a lot of the events. But I do sort of see growth in that area. You know, so many people like video games, and so many people like going to art, you know, exhibits. And so I think like the core audience gets it, but there's probably like a larger audience that would get something out of it that just isn't aware of it yet. You know, I mean, VSW's been around for over 50 years, and like even in Rochester, it's sort of like a hidden gem, which is fine. Like, I'm not trying to, you know, get everybody to come in or anything, but like, I think that one of my goals is to sort of just be as useful as possible to that community. And so, yeah, I think that's an area of growth. Yeah.
Thank you, yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, keep going. Yeah, keep going.
To if people are okay with that. And this has still to do with audience, but it has to do with dying.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I've never made a game that has dying, and that's not interested in that kind of, you know, experience.
Yeah.
But I've seen when I'm kind of like get friends of mine to like, oh, try this experience. They have that same hesitancy, right? Oh, I suck at games, I will die. Right? So my question is, so I'm really curious around people like that.
Yeah.
I'm really curious in that, like, these people, despite having that hesitance, they chose to come to this, right? To this exhibition and such. I don't know if you have any insight when you have had conversations with them and such on like that friction there, how they decided to end up coming anyway.
Yeah, so the question sort of starts with thinking about folks that are worried about dying in video games, and then say the question one more time.
So essentially, that how any insights you might have on how they kind of wrestle with that and decide to come to this experience anyway.
I see.
They express hesitancy.
Yeah.
I want to engage with something where I can die.
Okay, so yeah, so the question is, despite sort of having almost a fear of playing video games, you know, how and why might they find themselves in an art exhibition about video games? And there's probably a couple different answers to that question. The one that really comes to mind is that, you know, a family might show up, right? And the kids want to play video games, and which is like amazing, you know, like cool, like a 10-year-old's playing, you know, the blues, not I don't, there was a warning on Blue Suburbia specifically, but they might be playing Out for Delivery or something, and so the kids get it, that's another really interesting thing. I mean, I think that sort of general games audiences might not have many experience with these types of games, but just because they have experience with games in general, they kind of get it immediately. And they, you know, they know how to use the controls. They know what first person controls are like. You know, they know how to hold an Xbox controller, and they, you know, like people would get really invested in like getting all the achievements in Time Machine Bronzeville, like, and those are you know, the games folks. And so I found, you know, so if a family brings, you know, their kids and the kids are playing the games, it's usually the parents that are like, I don't want to touch it, you know, and then, you know, it's like, I understand where you're coming from. You know, it's like for the kids, and now I'm going to go off on a tangent. That's really interesting. You know, thinking about like video games are for kids, but then like you're in this like very subversive art environment, but like the video games are still for the kids. Like that's really interesting. And so, you know, parents or, you know, some of the older sort of arts audiences, you know, would express, they don't want to die. Another one would be like, I don't want to mess up the computer, which is like, I kept hearing that, you know, but I think that they're interested, you know, they want to engage with critical experimental art, which is like, there's not a lot of that in Rochester in the first place. And so I think that the art sort of lets people in, and then they just need like a bit more of a push to like engage with the gameplay. But yeah, I started joking that the exhibition could be called like games you can't die in. But yeah, well, great questions. Yeah, these both of you, one and then the other one. Yeah.
I'm, I find this really interesting what you're doing here as far as like taking the idea of a arcade as sort of like a conceit for an art installation that is as much in dialogue with what is outside of that space, you know, like an arcade game kind of almost like a very absorptive or insular social experience normally. And talking about it in a way that like engages with critical theory and the kind of things that we talk about in contemporary art. What I'm curious about is like, have you ever or have you thought about curating exhibits that incorporate other disciplines like sculpture, installation, even maybe interactive art, and how that would shift your role as a curator and kind of meshing those experiences into a cohesive exhibit?
Yeah, that's a really great question. That actually is something that I've thought a lot about. So yeah, you're totally, onto something. Um, for this exhibition specifically, it felt like a core value of the exhibition was like, this is a games exhibit and all the games are playable. And like they're coming as they are, right? And so I think that yeah, it was important for me to like not even really have like sometimes I'll see like a show and they'll have like here's the game that you can play or some other kind of, interactive work doesn't have to be a game, but then there's all these sort of like, then we like made prints of the images of the game. And so it's like, it almost feels like it might be trying to like legitimize the game as art and like, but the game, the game's the art, right? I mean, the prints are nice, but the game is the game. And I would be totally open to in future exhibitions having more of like a mix of mediums, and I think that's really interesting. But for this specific one, because it was the first one, it felt important to really just center like the playing of the games.
Yeah. Thank you. No, that's interesting, and I think that you could have something very unique to bring to that, since I do think that sometimes the games are just like, here is a thing, and we're going to legitimize it. That's what's around.
Yeah. Cool. Great question. Yeah. Did you also have a question? Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, right there.
I have a question about logistics.
Mm-hmm.
So the games are like complete assets, so it's not like a like gallery version. Were there docents to help people? Like, like what's the, how do you make it space like what's going on because it breaks stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. So like it's a questions about the logistics of having games in a gallery, sort of like how basically how do you ease people into making yeah. So then also like the role of docents. One of the things that I'll say is each of the games that we showed was sort of like a gallery version or like a public version. So most of the games had a feature that, they would reset if nobody touched them for 20 minutes or whatever. And so people would always sort of be able to start at the beginning. Alfred Delivery was like that. And so, or for instance, Anthology of the Killer, it didn't have all the chapters of the anthology. It only had the ones that Stephen thought would like sort of be nice as these kind of like bite-sized chunks of the work. Black Room was interesting because Black Room, the work is like the PC that it's on. And so when someone goes to play it, they have sort of access to the whole PC. And there's like all these sort of great parameters on like what's on the desktop and like what are the icons and like the color scheme of the PC. And so, and then there's also like moments in the game where you click on something and it will take you to like a Google search. So like that's really interesting. We did have, the gallery's not huge. When folks come in, there's a person at the front desk who sort of orients them to the space, but doesn't necessarily give them a lot of instruction. The catalog does have some sort of basic, like, this is how this is how you can interact with the work. But not a lot of direction. But yeah, I think one of the most important things was having those sort of like public or gallery versions of the work. Because I mean, if you're at your house and you're downloading a game and just like the context around how you're engaged with it are totally different than like a stranger comes up to something that they've never heard of before and they're trying to engage with it. So just like thinking of ways to have elements of your game that sort of can ease people into it. Is that a good answer? Okay.
That is
Cool. Okay, I think we are out of time, but I see that you have a question, so we should come down and we'll talk about it. Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much. I also have catalogs if you want one.